Hi, Liberators. This is Tiffany Coleman with another episode of Interesting People. Today, I am very excited to have a special guest on the show. This is Miss Patrice Lewis. She is a friend of mine. But let me just tell you a little bit about her, and then we'll go from there. Patrice spent 4 years as working with U.S. Senator Mark Warner as his outreach representative. And prior to that, she worked for Delegate Onsley Ware, who was a delegate in Roanoke, her hometown. Currently, she works for just kidding, Southeastern Institute of Research, where she oversees and provides strategic guidance on successful communications and public relations projects for their major clients. And she is also a professor at my other alma mater that I rarely get a chance to talk about, Virginia Commonwealth University, in their Brand Center. And a fun fact, she is actually licensed to practice law. She is an entertainment lawyer, and she's licensed to practice law in the state of Maryland. I want to present to some and introduce to others Miss Patrice Lewis. Yay! Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Tiffany. I am excited to be here with you.
So today we are in the throes of an election cycle. We are in the middle, smack dab in the middle of it. We are, I don't want to get dramatic, but like there are things that are just going on that we can't continue in. There's a cycle that's happening, and it's scary for some. Some people are really excited about the way that the country is going. And that's just the reality of where we are. There are some who are miserable and some who are just thrilled about the direction we're going in. The reason I wanted to have you on the show is because you and I were actually in the car together, and you and I talked about politics. And you were the first person that I was able to talk to that kind of helped me to be able to see both sides, who helped me to be able to not get so emotional when it comes to politics, to think critically about it. And that's why I said when I came up with this whole show idea, I was like, you were somebody I wanted to be on the show because I wanted to have this conversation with you. You worked for Senator Warner, and we know where he stands. But I think you have an interesting perspective to offer people. And I think there's something that you can share with us. And my hope is that that when we think about politics, not vote, but when we think about politics and discuss politics, we'll be able to have I want to help people to be able to have a rational discussion about it. So I'm not gonna belabor too much. We're just going to get right into it. I'm ready to just kind of get right into it and start having this conversation. So to start off, does voting really matter, and why? Why does it matter?
That's a good question. And thank you, Tiffany, for the opportunity. I love our conversations when we have them. So this is just us politicking like we have done in the past. So I'm really excited about it. And hey, Liberators, hopefully y'all are having a good day. So does voting really matter? Yes. And the reason that voting matters is because everything that goes with voting affects so many things in your life. And when I talk to people about the process, when I talk to people about voting, I let them know it's not just about who's your favorite. It is really about who is going to impact so many things going on in my life right now. Who is going to impact how I'm educated? Who is going to impact what services I get? Who is going to impact the police and whether or not I get safety, public safety, and who is going to impact my business and who is going to impact my job? There are so many things that are a part of that legislative process that voting is your opportunity to say, I'm in control of who I have representing me and what they represent me to do in order to make sure my life is the way that I want it to be. So you need to vote to show I really care about what's happening in my life, and I want to make sure I have a say in what's happening in my life.
And so voting is the only way we really get to do that?
It's not the only way, but it is one way.
And it's a big way.
Yes. And so many people, they're apathetic because they don't understand the process, and or they don't really see how it affects them. So they're not really looking at the everyday things that affect them. But so many of the things that happen in your life are based on laws. You have seatbelt laws. So when you're in your car, you have laws and how you're driving. And if you're in public transportation, there are laws that are regulating how that is working. When you go to your job, there are laws that regulate that. Your housing, there are laws that regulate that. There are laws that regulate education. There are so many laws out there that impact your life that you don't even think about. And the only way for you to really understand that is to get involved in the process. And when you get involved in the process, a part of that is voting. So all of that really encompasses who you are and what you're doing. And you want to make sure that you have a say in what happens in your life.
So, okay. So if you don't mind if I veer off just a little bit, when you say get involved, like when social media is now an integral part of our process. And there are a lot of people who are saying so many things on social media.
Yes.
When you say get involved, what does that mean?
It means know it for yourself. So this is kind of like, and I'm getting a little preachy. I'm a PK, so I'm gonna get preachy every now and then, right? It is just like people say, you need to know the Bible for yourself. You cannot just go on what people are telling you. True. You cannot just go on what people are saying in social media about what's happening in your life. You need to look and see what laws are affecting you. You need to be a part of the process. You need to know who your school board members are. You need to know who your city council members are. You need to know who your delegates are and who your senators are. You need to know your representatives. All of this is based on you doing the work to find out for yourself. There are places you can go to find that information, but it's up to you to look for and find that information and read it for yourself. You cannot depend on other people telling you what you need to think, how you need to feel, how you need to vote. You need to make sure that you are as informed as you can be so that you vote for the right person that is going to align with your values and what you want for your life.
Okay. So does that also mean like going to city council meetings, going to school board meetings, going to whatever meeting that delegates or senators or representatives have for people?
Yes, and there are times where you're not able to, and
Sure.
and it's not to discredit the fact that you have a life and you have things going on in your life.
Absolutely.
But if you want to make sure that you understand the laws that are affecting your life, you are going to have to put yourself in that position to understand it. And that means getting to know who your representatives are, going to some of those meetings. If you can't go to the meetings, they have them posted on their websites. So going and listening to what they're saying on their websites, talking to your friends about it, and maybe they saw the meeting. But I still really want to push you understanding it for yourself. So that's school board meetings, that's city council meetings, that is the General Assembly and seeing what's happening in the General Assembly, especially if it is a piece of legislation that is important to you. And that is looking at whatever is happening federally, if that's an important issue to you. You want to make sure that you are updated and insightful as much as possible on the laws that are affecting your life. And then you're going to have to do the work to do that.
Okay. So you've given us the charge on that and why voting does really matter. So because we want to make sure that people who are in line with what we want are in place, basically, is what the point of voting is. So when people are talking about voting, especially coming around to this presidential election, the federal, and we live in a two-party system right now.
Yes.
What I hear talk of people saying that they're going to vote third party. Can you help us understand the importance of, like, why would we vote third party? What's the point of that? Because to me, based on my understanding, it doesn't seem like it's a reasonable thing to do at this moment in time, but I could be wrong. So should we vote third party? And if we should, why should we? If we shouldn't, why should we not do it?
So third party is really admirable, and people that want to vote third party are doing so for probably two reasons. Number one is that they think they really like the third party candidate, and they say, okay, I really align with that person's viewpoint, I'm going to vote for them. You're not going to change their minds. It is what it is. The other half of that is people are voting third party because they don't necessarily like the two front runners, and they don't want to necessarily vote for the two front runners. Voting third party at this time, as you said, is really not beneficial. If you're trying to say to yourself, I'm going to stick it to them and I'm going to tell them, because they think I'm going to vote for them, I'm not going to vote for them, I'm going to vote for the third party, and my vote going to show them, it's not showing anybody anything, because we live in a two-party system. And until we change that system, we're going to live in a two-party system. So one of those two guys are going to win. So if you are a strategic person, you need to think, who aligns more with how I feel, and or who surrounds themselves with people that I think could actually benefit me. And in order to do that, you have to know who they are, and you have to know who the people are around them. And when you think of that, you say, I at least have an opportunity to negotiate and work with one person over the other. And that person, I'm going to make them work for my vote, because my vote isn't free. No vote is free, and no one should say that the vote is free. I'm going to make them work for my vote because I'm the prize. They're trying to get my vote. I'm going to make them work. And after they're in the position, I'm going to continue to make them work on the promises that they made when they were on the campaign trail. But there are two people running who one of them is going to align with what you want and how you feel. So you vote with the person who's closest to making that concession, because everything is a negotiation. You're not going to get everything that you want from anybody.
For sure.
Right? Unless you run in, unless it's you, right? You're not going to get everything that you want from somebody. So you're going to have to make concessions, and so are they. Like, they may be running on a certain type of platform, but the reality is they're going to have to make some type of concession. So the strategic thing to do is, I'm going to vote for the person who most aligns with, or at least surrounds themselves with people that I can really have an influence and impact, that so they will more likely go the way that I want them to go.
Okay. So it's more about finding the person, like you said, just to kind of recap. It's just about finding the person who is closer to what I want and my ideals versus the person who is the opposite of what we are. Because
Right.
even though we may want a 3-party system or a multiple party system, and this has just kind of been my kind of take on it, I feel like election day is not the day to do the protest vote or what have you. I feel like we need to, if you want to build a third party, actually let's go out and build it the other 364 days of the year. Like, it takes time to build a party. It takes money. It takes skill. It takes campaigning. It takes so many things to go build this third party.
Right.
I just feel like election day is not the day to do it.
It's not. And so many people, unfortunately, we live in a time where a lot of people are thinking, well, my candidate who I was supporting didn't get voted into this 2-party system, so I'm not going to vote because I didn't necessarily want this person and I didn't necessarily want that person. I get it. I do. The reality of this is this is all about a chess game. It is not just something where you're going to get the person that you want all of the time. That does not mean you give up on the system. Giving up and producing apathy is not going to help you. It's going to hurt you. So what you do is you say, I've got a couple of people. I can't help it. I've got a couple of people that I need to choose from. I'm going to push somebody to make sure they're doing what I need them to do and tell them what I think. And I need to push the person that I think is more likely to bend my way than the other person. Because you know that person's not going to bend. So how can I work with the person that I think can bend and let them know, again, they want your vote. They want your vote. So you put the fire under their booty and let them know, yes, I love saying it like that, fire under the booties, to let them know that this needs to happen and this is how you get their vote. And trust and believe, there have been times where people have changed their minds because they realize that's the way to get your vote. It is just like you realize you're the prize in this. I am the prize. They want my vote. It may not be the person that I necessarily wanted at the beginning, but they want my vote. So I'm going to do what I can to make sure that they get my vote. And then when they get it, I'm going to make sure that they live up to their expectations, especially if they want to be reelected.
So election day is not the day where it ends. It honestly just begins on election day.
Yes. And that's the problem a lot of us have is we become disengaged after election day. And so, and especially like federal. So we vote for a president, we vote for whoever. And then we just, okay, whatever. This is how life is. We don't hold them accountable, realizing that they more than likely want to run again. And so they're still campaigning through this whole time. They're still trying to campaign. They're trying to make legislation happen, but they're also still campaigning. So we have to hold them accountable for the work that they've done in between that time to say, okay, you deserve my vote again.
So would you even say, and this is completely off, not completely off, but just veering to the right, off the left a little bit here. Do you think that that's how we get stuck in this cycle of career politicians, because we weren't engaged enough?
Yes. Well, it's 2 reasons. One is there aren't term limits, and there should be term limits.
Sure.
And that's me. I don't know how other people feel, but I definitely feel like there's term limit. There needs to be term limits. But the other part of that is we think of it as a popularity contest.
Mm,
And so we go with the name we recognize.
mm,
And
mm-hmm.
there are people who are in position only because their name is recognized because they've been there forever.
Wow.
Rather than the work that they do.
Mm.
And we do not hold them accountable enough for the work that they do, but we know their name. And because we know their name, we associate that with, well, okay, I should vote for this person. That's why we have to be so educated about the process and
Mm-hmm.
what people are voting and how they're voting, because that eliminates the ability for them to just say, you know my name. We put fire under their booties again. We put fire under their booties to make them really have to do the work that they need to do.
Because that even kind of makes me think of like voting along party lines too. I've always been a Republican, so I'm going to vote Republican. I've always been a Democrat. I'm going to vote Democrat. My family was a Democrat. My family's been Republican. We've been Republican for generations. Instead of actually taking a look at each candidate and seeing what their ideas are, where they stand on certain issues, and seeing if it aligns with what we want to see, the direction we want to see this country go.
And that's a problem. That's probably the biggest problem that we see when it comes to politics is we associate politics has become idolatry, and we idolize a certain party. And I see that in my own family, and I'm going to give them as an example. I love my grandmother. She is going to be D all the way. Doesn't matter. She's going to vote D. I have an aunt who is more Republican. She's voting R. It don't matter. It's going to be R.
Wow.
What ends up happening in those situations, and that's her daughter, that's her mother. What ends up happening in those situations is that we end up with candidates who are horrible. But that they have that D or that R by their name. And we are so devoted because of something that happened or something we've learned or something that we've been taught in our families. We decide we are not going to look at the candidate themselves. We are going to look at the party that they're associated with, because we associate that party with aligning with our views rather than a candidate. And then people get into office who are horrible, but they have that name, they have that R, or they have that D, and we only have two parties, so they have that. And when you aren't an informed person, when you aren't an informed citizen, when you aren't an informed voter, you will tend to go either way. And that's not to say that I love them. I love my family members. And I think that they are informed in a way. But we have come to this place where we idolize the party rather than really examining the candidate that is with that party.
Okay. And we get sticking with the party lines. That seems, when you put it that way, it seems almost arbitrary, to vote for somebody just because they're associated with this party, instead of their principles or what they value as important. And if they align with what I feel is the best direction. Since we're here talking about the D and the R, and it's not the Dominican Republic, what does it mean? I'm going to skip around a little bit. What does it mean to be a conservative, / Republican, and a Democrat / a liberal? Because these are buzzwords that we hear. When we hear liberal, we think yeah, you know, there's a certain group of people that get infuriated. And then when we hear Republican or conservative, the other group gets infuriated. So what does it mean? What do those two things mean?
So I like to put conservative and liberal in two categories, and it's just like you have a family and you have the good child. So the good child does everything that they're supposed to do. They stick to the rules. They believe what they've been told. They are the ones that really, really believe and really think that the way that they live and the life that they have been told is the way that they need to go. That is conservative. So the conservative is the person that is what I've been told, how I've been told has worked, and the rules that I have been given are the rules that I need to live by, and I am okay with that life. There's no real going or veering off from that. That's exactly where I need to be.
Mm-hmm.
The liberal is the rebellious child. So they're the ones that said, no, even though I've been told this, I've learned a different way. I feel a different way. I want to live a different way. And that is what a liberal is. A liberal is saying, I want to rebel against what the traditional thing is and what my family's been doing for all of this time. I want to do my own thing. And I think this way is better and gets more people to be considered a part of the family, which wouldn't have necessarily been considered a part of the family if we did it the traditional way. So you have the good son, the one that tends to be, quote unquote, the one that tends to be the idolized person. That's really that conservative traditional viewpoint. And then you have the right, exactly. He does exactly what he's supposed to do. He toes the line, status quo. He's really about that. And then the liberal is, I'm the rebellious child. I don't necessarily agree with what I've been told. I feel there's a different way to go, and I'm going to go that different way.
So that's what the buzzwords mean. Like that's what they really they mean. Okay.
Yes.
So then I guess, so is there a difference between a conservative and a Republican?
Yes. And even though right now the parties are Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, the reality is our history has not always been that way.
Sure.
And so we have seen the conservative party be a little bit more liberal. That's why people love to quote Martin Luther King and, Abraham Lincoln. These were the party, we were the party of change. Well, that was a time when the Republican was really associated with that liberal change thought process.
Wow.
It changed, and it changed around the civil rights movement. So that's when the Conservative Party became that traditional party. And the Republican Party became that traditional party, but it wasn't always that way. And so when we think of conservative and liberal, we think of R&D now, but who knows what will happen 20 years from now? 20 years from now, it may morph into those other positions. It really depends on what are the laws at the time and what is the status quo and what's the rebellion from that status quo.
So does Republican automatically mean a racist or an ill-informed person or?
No. Okay. It doesn't automatically. The reason why it's associated with racism right now is because the status quo, remember that conservative status quo, we go the way that we've been, has a lot to do with systemic racism. And until we really come to grips with the reality that our country was founded on racism, our country was built on a racist system, we will continue to put R and racist together. I don't necessarily think that they belong together, but they are the ones that really like the system the way that it is. And the way that it is a racist system. So that's why they are commingled together. Go ahead.
Because the racism helps to maintain that status quo.
Yes. Because that's the way the system was built. And we have to be honest with ourselves with this. The system was built in saying that white men who are Christian prospered. And it didn't have a place for women. It definitely didn't have a place for Black people. It didn't have a place. Well, it did. It had a 3/5 place for Black people. We weren't considered human. We were 3/5 of human.
Over that.
Right. But there were no places for other people. And the way that the system has been built has really been built to help a certain type of person. And until we reconcile that there have been laws and legislation that were put into place that determined what race was, for the reason of saying that white was better and superior than the Black race, we will not be able to reconcile that system is something that needs to be changed and altered. And what you're going to see is conservative R, because they like the system, is going to go for the system, which is racist, unfortunately. And then the liberal D side is going to go for changing that system.
Wow.
That's deep.
It is. This is what I appreciate you, because you have such a great way of breaking it up sometimes. Because I think the hard thing to reconcile, and I'll be honest, I have a hard time. There's a part of me that lives in denial about the fact that the system is structured in such a way to oppress Black people or people of color so vehemently. There's a part of me that doesn't want to accept that. Meaning, when I say accept it, I don't mean that I'm out here tearing up stuff to change it. It means that when I think about these things, I can't rationalize it in myself that somebody would do something like that. When the reality is, the system was built brick by brick this way. And that's the unfortunate thing for me, is that we have to come to terms with that. Now, in dealing with all of that, which is what it is, it sounds like the status quo has to shift in some way. It has to move, it has to change, it has to, something's got to give.
I want to add this. I think that the people that founded this country did right. And I don't want to make it as if they were completely off. Okay. And that nothing that they did was right, because that's not true. They did make a system. They didn't realize, I don't think. They made a system that allows for us, Black people, other ethnicities, other people that they didn't expect, to really voice our concerns and to be able to make that change. Okay. That's why we are able to have the parties that we do. That's why we have a liberal system. That's why we have such a hard time when we get to bills and how they're passed. There's a reason for that. Okay. And even though the system was built for white supremacy. The reality is we can make that system work for us because of the way that they did it.
Okay.
And they didn't realize that. And that to me is a God thing. And you know how you're trying to make a system like, you know, we're going to benefit, and it's not. And I don't want to say, because I don't want to put in their mind what they were thinking, because I don't know. I just know through certain laws that it definitely was, we want the white male Christian father, you know, husband to prosper, because that's just how it is. But I don't want to negate the fact that they did make it easier for us to alter the system, because they made a process where we can do that. We just have to work that process
and learn
and we
it.
have to, yes.
Okay.
And that's important. That is important, is us learning the system, and then we're able to alter the system in the way that we want to alter it.
Okay. Well, that gives me a little hope then.
Yes.
That's it. Because I felt like I was going into the sunken place for a second. So that the system isn't necessarily set in stone. That because of the way that it was structured, and I think we have to acknowledge too, when we talk about the founding fathers, a lot of them weren't Christian.
Right.
They were deists.
Right.
So the whole idea that we're based on that the country was founded by Christians is not true.
Right.
It just became the popular religion in the country.
Right.
But to know that the system is structured in such a way that it is that once we learn the system, we can change it. And it sounds like we have to get in the system, unfortunately. Yes. Like, as crazy as it may sound, and it's popular to call people sellouts and stuff like that. But it sounds like we have to get in the game first, learn how it's played, and then change it.
Yes. How can you change something you don't know?
Exactly. Right. So it's more than just, I'm going to yell at people on Facebook and call them whack because they don't see things the way, and I'm not trying to be like, I really ain't. I know. But I'm so tired of it. It's more than just you being a personality on social media. It's more than you. Yes, you'll get followers. Yes, you'll get people to listen, subscribe. You'll get sponsors to pay you lots of money. But to be a person that is real and effective in change, it sounds like, especially when it comes to this political process, you got to get in it before you can change anything.
Yes.
And
because again, how do you know it unless you're in it?
Right.
You can't change something. You can't change anything without knowing what it is. So to say to yourself, I want to change it, how do you know what it is? Until you know what it is, you can't change it. And so you've got to get yourself in. It's like any tactic. This could be Army, this could be Navy, military, whatever you're doing, you want to know what the tactics are. So then you can change them, or you can alter them, or you can at least master them. If you don't know what they are, how are you going to do that?
Right.
All you're doing is talking.
Right.
And what we see on social media is a lot of people talking.
Yes.
But they don't know the system. And when they understand and learn the system, that's when they're able to say, I've got it. I've mastered the system. Now I can alter the system because I know the weak links. And so many people so many people look for the biggest prize when it comes to politics. They look for the federal side of it, but that's not where the system really changes. That's not the biggest prize.
So when you say that, it made me think of, okay, so let's just jump into that then. So what affects us more? Like, how does this political process work? We know there's a bill becoming a law. We can talk about that because that's actually something I'm curious about as well. But what is most important about this political? What affects us the most?
What affects you the most is the local.
Okay, and when I say the most, just for people who are listening and may be confused, I'm talking about on the level. So on the local, on the state, the federal, on those levels.
Right. The local affects most people, everyone. The local affects everyone more.
Okay.
What is unfortunate is because the federal is everyone. You know, the whole United States, people focus on the federal. But when you're talking about your daily life, it's the local stuff that really affects you.
Okay.
Because your schools are not necessarily determined by Secretary DeVos. Your your education system. Right. Your education system is really focused on your local school board. Your city ordinances and whatever is your city council or your board of supervisors. They're the ones that really affect you. And one of the things, the delegate, who I love and was one of my favorite bosses, and I learned the most from.
Just to make sure people are aware, she's talking about Delegate Ansley Ware of Roanoke.
Yes,
who
Delegate
is a judge
Ansley Ware.
right now.
He is, and he is the first African American judge. I have to give that kudos in the General District Court and the Juvenile and Domestic Relations Court. So we really want to give him kudos for that.
Absolutely.
One of the things that he taught me was, he said, Patrice, it's all local. So even in the states, even in the federal, everything that is affected is really about that local politics and local legislation. You have to focus on that local portion of it before you can do anything else. Because that really does affect your everyday life and everything that you're going through. And so that's where you really want to make sure that you are impacting is that local body. So you want to get close to your city council members. You want to get close to your school board members. You want to understand what city ordinances are out there because that affects your everyday life. The state affects some of the things that happen every day, but not necessarily at the level that your local does.
Okay.
And then the federal, of course, affects more people, but doesn't necessarily affect your everyday life.
Gotcha.
So you want to focus on your local electeds more than you want to focus on your state electeds and then your federal. And this is even as you are, if you're thinking of running for something, you want to have that local base before you go to, because I see so many people, and this is what the delegate told me, you see so many people like, oh, I want to run for congressman, or oh, I want to run for state senator or U.S. senator without doing the local work. You need a base of local people that can back you before you do any of that. Because that's where the work really happens. So one of the things you said is, how does the bill become law? And I want to talk about that and make sure that we understand how that happens. And then you get to understand why it's important for you to be engaged.
Yes. So take notes, friends.
and I'm going to try to simplify it. So this is the Pilu version. I'm going to tell you
Okay.
this is the Pilu version.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very convoluted version, and it's a convoluted system, and it's convoluted for a reason. The people that founded this country, some people say our founding fathers. I like to say the people that founded this country.
Okay. They ain't no kin to me.
Right? No. The people
That was such a black girl moment. Like, let's just,
yes.
that was such a
Look.
black girl moment. Anyway.
Look. So the people that founded this country really did it with a reason. And their reason was that we want to stick with the Constitution and we want to stick with the laws that we come up with now. So we are going to make this process as hard as possible for there to be alterations and additions to what we have already put together. So they had in mind that it's not going to be easy for a law to pass.
If I could tap dance on the other side of the fence, not tap dance, but like just kind of jump on the other side of the fence. I get that. Because then you could possibly have, Stephen from down the street wanting to say, I think we should scrap traffic lights. I'm going to go and do A, B, and C to get that, taken care of. And then before you know it, it's a law.
Right. And so it's not a bad thing. Yeah, it's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, again, where I said, the people that made our laws and that founded our country, even though they had it for a certain group of people, they still made it a way that's good for us if we learn the system. So they made it convoluted for a reason. And they didn't want to make it easy. So we have laws, we have things that are on the books. And these things that are on the books, we could say either they need to be altered for some reason, they don't include people, or they exclude certain people, or we want them to exclude, so they need to be altered. There's something that is not there that we want to add, or there's something there that we want to remove. So these are existing laws that we have. Either you want to alter what's there, you want to add something that's not there, or you want to remove something that's there. That's where the bill starts.
Okay.
So whatever you're thinking of, so let's say Tiffany decides, I want people to really think about African American history in the real way, and I want it taught in the way that it needs to be taught.
The irony is that I'm actually working on something like that right now.
Yes. I kind of came up with that. So let's say that that's your, right. So let's say that that's your cause. And you want it statewide, right? And you want it in secondary and primary education.
Okay.
So that would include the Department of Education, Virginia Department of Education, right? That would include laws that affect the Virginia Department of Education. So you would need to have a law or a legislation passed that would allow that to happen.
Okay.
So let's say you do. And in order for that to happen, you have to have a sponsor who is a representative and or a senator from your district.
Okay.
And so what happens is you have a conversation with them. You say, you know what, I really think that African American and African history needs to be taught differently in the education system. I see that there are some laws about this. I want to add this because it's not there. That person hopefully also is in the education committee or in that subcommittee about primary or secondary education. What they do is they write the bill and they say, okay, I'm going to introduce it in this session.
Mm-hmm.
They decide, I'm going to sponsor this bill in the session. You have to have a legislator sponsor the bill.
Okay.
The best way for this to happen is to have your House of Representatives and your senator sponsor similar types of bills. So
Okay.
one's in the House and one's in the Senate.
Now, what
again,
house? The state
so
house?
this is House, yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And even though this is the process that I'm describing for the House, it really matches for the state and for the federal.
Oh, okay.
Local is a little different, but we'll talk about that in a second. But I kind of want to go over this process. Again, this is the PLU process of how this works.
The PLU explanation of the process.
Yes.
Let's be, yes.
That's
so
right.
I just need to make sure people know she's the real deal. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Keep going.
So you have somebody introduce this.
Mm-hmm.
They introduce this legislation, they sponsor it. Hopefully you get co-sponsors on both the House and the Senate side.
Mm-hmm.
So it will be identical bills that look the same, but because of the process, that's the reason why you would want a House person and a Senate person to introduce this bill.
Okay.
And that's similar. So we'll just go with the House for now. The
Mm-hmm.
House person co-sponsors this bill. They try to get co-sponsors within the Education Committee if they're not in the Education Committee.
Okay.
Or they try to get bipartisan support. So then it's easier for the bill to pass when they have the support that they have, right?
Mm-hmm.
They introduce this legislation. It goes to subcommittee.
Subcommittee. That's a term I've heard.
Subcommittee. So there are committees that are within each body in the House and the Senate. In this instance, it would be the Education Committee, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then under them is a subcommittee. The subcommittees are higher education and secondary and primary education.
Okay.
These subcommittees hear the bills first.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones that hear the bills before other people hear the bills. It goes to the subcommittee based on what is the topic of the bill.
Okay.
So it goes to the subcommittee. The subcommittee has testimony. So they would have you speak. They would have the delegate speak, whoever's sponsoring the bill, whoever is for the bill, they would speak. Then they would have people who are against the bill. They would speak in front of the subcommittee.
Okay.
The subcommittee says either yay or nay.
Okay.
Based on majority vote. If it's nay, it's tabled. If it's tabled, that means it ain't going no further. That's it. And you will have to resubmit it next year.
Okay.
That's it. It's done. Whenever you see something is tabled, that's done.
Okay. Okay.
If the majority votes for it, it goes to the full committee. So that's the Education Committee.
Okay.
Same process, testifying, whatever needs to happen. It is either tabled, which means it goes nowhere,
right,
or it's voted on. Then it goes to the whole body. So that would be the House, in this case, or the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
Goes to the full body. The legislators had their conversations about the bill. It could be amended if need be. If there are some amendments that people want to have to the bill, they have the amendments. Whatever happens, these happen through this process. But it's either, go ahead.
So that's when we start negotiating things of like,
yes,
if we cut this or add this, then we can pass it.
Yes, and that happens throughout the committee process.
Even subcommittee?
Yes.
Okay.
But usually it really happens around that full committee process. that may have some additions or some amendments to that. So
Okay.
they introduced that at that time.
Okay.
It's either tabled, that means it didn't pass,
Didn't move.
or it's passed, right?
Okay.
Right. Then there's this thing called crossover. So that's when the House bills go to the Senate, Senate bills go to the House.
Okay.
The exact same process happens over on that Senate side.
Okay.
So it goes through subcommittee, committee, to the full body.
Okay.
If it passes all of those committees, then it goes to the executive branch. It goes to the governor or to the president.
Okay.
They have the opportunity to say, yes, it's signed, it goes into law, or they have the opportunity to veto. I don't want it. I don't like it. No. So they veto it. It goes back to the House and the Senate, and the majority of the House and the Senate have to say, yes, we want this. 2/3 vote for both houses. And they get to override the veto for it to be a bill.
Okay. Okay.
That's the process. And it's so, like I said, it's so convoluted. It's so extensive for a reason, because they don't want to add anything. They feel like the Constitution, the way that it was written, and the laws and the codes, the way that they were written, and they were whatever happened in the Supreme Court should stand. And this has to go through such a scrutiny of both houses and also the executive branch before it can become law, because we want to make sure that if this is something that needs to be law, it is really something that everyone feels like it needs to be a law.
Wow. Okay. So this made my head hurt, because it's so much to think about. So if we could let's just say we didn't have to go through filibuster. We didn't have to go through like people not wanting to bring it to the floor and all of that stuff. If we just kind of got green lights all across the board, can you give me an estimate about how much time it could take?
It depends on the board, and
Okay.
it depends on the body.
Okay.
So for General Assembly, this is Virginia.
Okay.
And for the state of Virginia, there is either a 90-day session, which is when they think about the budget, or there's a 45-day session.
Okay.
If it got the green lights all the way, it would happen within that 45, 90 days. And then the governor would vote for it, and then it just is, within that 90-day something period. Federal government happens a little longer.
Okay.
So it just would take a little bit a few more months. But it would be, however is the shortest time for those months, that's when it would happen.
And again, this is if there's no obstruction, there's no amending, everybody loves it.
Yes.
It's just, it could take a month and a half to 3 months.
Yes.
We're not going to add all the other stuff that people do to
right.
keep it, because something like this sounds like if you come up against all those roadblocks, it could take years.
Yes. And it has for a lot of people.
Wow.
But that's important to note. This does not happen overnight.
Yeah.
And so many people, we live in an instant gratification world.
Yes.
That we expect things to happen overnight. Nothing, especially within our legislative system and our politics system, will happen overnight.
And I think that's one thing I want to help other people understand, especially with the movement that's going on right now, that just because you marched, just because you took to the streets, just because you're bringing attention to certain things, I applaud it. I support it.
Yes.
But this is not all that it takes.
No.
Change takes a long time.
Yes.
You can send your list of demands, but there is a process that has to happen in order for this to work.
Think about the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement didn't just happen in 1964 and 1965.
No.
It took years.
No.
Decades.
It took
And
how many bodies hanging from trees?
Exactly. It is not for those of us who want something to happen immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part which saddens me, because we've gotten into this age where we expect things to change immediately.
Yeah.
And the political process was built in a way that can't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And there's good and there's bad in that. There's bad
Absolutely.
in terms of wanting to affect change, especially when it comes to racism and things like that. Yes, you want it to happen immediately. But the flip side of that is, when it does happen, it can't be changed immediately.
Right.
So you want to keep fighting. You should keep fighting. Don't give up just because it doesn't happen tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta keep at it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Gotta keep at it.
And that's what I want to make sure people know, is that if you're in it, you have to be in it for the long haul.
Yes.
Because it's not just based off of what you say. We do want to change laws. We have to be prepared for at least a month and a half at bare minimum, to be able.
And that's it.
Right, exactly. No, you're right. No, you're right. Keep going.
I was just going to say, and that's if it's something that people actually agree with, everyone agrees with.
No opposition on either side at all.
Right.
And it's not an Instagrammable moment. It's not. No. It's a boring moment. It's a lot of meetings. It's a lot of like talking it out over and over and over and over and over and over, like over and over again.
But don't give up.
Yes.
That's the key. Is too many of us give up.
Yeah.
And I know we give up because we're tired.
Or apathetic or
apathetic, because we're like, oh, it's not happening. But every needle that you're able to move, every second that you continue, is the second that says it can happen. And it's just like you're chipping away at a stone. Although you're chipping and you're seeing things and it's not happening as fast, you're still making progress. Yes. So when you continue to do it, it may be a year from now, it could be 10 years from now, it could be 20 years from now. There is progress that happens when you continue to
keep
run.
Going. Yes. And I think that's also the thing we have to understand too, is that's why the baton is passed. Because this is not a one generation thing.
No.
And
it can't be.
No. And I get frustrated sometimes, or I'll even say hurt, when I hear people say, I'm not my ancestors. No, you don't have the right to say that, to discredit what they did and how they did it. It's because of your ancestors that you have never felt the sting of a whip on your back.
This is because people associate what they've heard.
Yeah.
And not what is the truth with their ancestors. Their thought is there is timidity, and that their ancestors were actually allowing these things to happen.
Slavery was a choice.
Right. Right.
Right.
Or even not even that, but just that we conceded.
Mm-hmm.
And we allowed these things to happen to us. And
Mm-hmm.
it does not count it doesn't put into account the people that tried to learn the system.
Mm-hmm.
So again, they could change the system and break the
Mm-hmm.
system. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't account for the people that endured all of the things that they've endured because they knew if I endure it now, I can change things in the future. It puts us in a passive kind of view as Black people, especially when it comes to our ancestors, like we were passive
Mm-hmm.
and not that we were active. And so many of us, I think about myself, I couldn't have been whooped at all.
Mm-mm.
Like I couldn't have even picked cotton. I would have been a hot mess out there trying to pick cotton.
And Patrice, she crying again.
Exactly. Like, no, this ain't working. I can't do that. We forget the strength and resilience of our ancestors who
Mm-hmm.
endured a time when it was okay and legal for people to beat and rape and to murder us in a way that is not the same now. Now, that's not to say that everything is equal and we're good, but we have a lot more amenities and a lot more things that we have that our ancestors did not. And the
Mm-hmm.
fact that they endured all of that for us to get to where we are is amazing. They didn't have education.
Mm-hmm.
I think of my ancestors and learning that my great 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 grandparents didn't have education.
Mm.
Like they didn't pass, they didn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
Um and to think of where we are compared to where they are and how they survived with that to birth our ancestors, to birth us.
Mm-hmm.
We have come so far because of them, and we owe them the ability to participate in something they did not have the ability to participate in
Yeah.
and change it because they didn't have the ability to change it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like we have to remember that
Yes.
as we go about trying to create change and foster a better world. We have to remember that they endured so much because so that we could have so much. And that
Yes.
isn't history is a collection of deeds. It's every slave that ran away on the plantation. Not just the ones that we know about, the famous ones. It's every slave that ran away. It's every person that sat at a lunch counter and had milk, ketchup, whatever spilled on them. Not just the ones that we hear about, because there are some people did sit-ins in Virginia. Students in
Mm-hmm.
Virginia University did a sit-in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that one sit-in was a part of a movement. That's what created the
Mm-hmm.
movement. It was little groups of people all over the country sitting down at lunch counters doing something that basic, which was illegal at the time. So
Mm-hmm.
to sit there, and just negate all that these people have done and say something like that is, to me, it's heartbreaking. And I think it's also a sign that we don't know all of our history
We don't.
and we don't
We don't.
respect it.
No,
Mm-mm.
we don't.
Um, I guess we can, because there's a couple other questions I have. Let's see. All right. So it's two more that I think I'm gonna ask you, because we've covered quite a few things that I've wanted to ask you anyway. But how do we move forward from here? Where we are, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're in the middle of a movement. We're in the middle of political whatever this is. How are we going to move out of this or beyond this?
The way that we move out of this is to recognize and honestly assess where we have been. And to realize, unfortunately, that we need to be those rebellious children. And that the status quo and where we have been has not afforded us the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness that we said that we wanted as a nation. We have, unfortunately, put ourselves in a place where certain groups get that life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, but others do not. And until we say to ourselves, everyone needs the ability to live. And no, I may not agree with the way that they live. I may not necessarily agree with what they do, but they have the right to live.
Yes, they do.
We cannot move past that. And it's going to take a real reckoning of all of us, because it's not just certain parts of us. I would love to say I am not guilty, but I am guilty of perpetuating a system that does not allow that. But our Constitution, as crazy as it may seem, and even though the 3/5 of us and some of us weren't counted as people, says that we all have that ability. So we need to allow us to have that ability. And that's where the problem is that there are people fighting for the ability to have that life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And we are not allowing them to, because of fear or whatever reason. So we move past this when we recognize that we have stopped people from that ability. And as a nation and as a country, we have to allow them to do that. And when we allow them to do that, and we will see a change in us. It is not stopping you from being the Christian that you are. It is not stopping you from being the person that you are, to allow other people to live the way that they live. And when we reconcile ourselves with that and understand that that is not of Christ, and I'm speaking specifically to Christians because that's really a lot of the holdup, is when we say that is not of Christ. Our heaven, or what do we believe of heaven, is not this place where we do not allow people to live the way that they want to live. It is what it is. When we get to the place where we can say, you do whatever you want to do, I will still continue to appreciate and love my God the way that I love him, and be able to live with you and your decisions and say that's between you and God. It is what it is, and my decisions are between me and God. That's when we will move past this place of dissension, and of really being like we have to control what other people do. Can't.
No.
That's not our job.
No, it's not.
It's not our job.
No, it's not.
And so when we get to that place of letting people have their life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, that's when we will really affect change.
Mm. Mm.
And that starts locally. It doesn't start on the national level. It starts on locally saying you can do and you can live the way that you want to live.
Wow.
And I'm okay with that.
Wow. I don't think we need to go any further. I think that is such a well articulated argument, and I believe it's necessary, and I believe that that's what we as people do really need to come to terms with.
Yes.
This whole idea of how everybody needs to be like me is, yeah, it's because somebody being gay or transgender or Hindu doesn't actually provide any danger to me. It's not
None.
it's not infringing on my right to do anything, and it's their personal choice. Everybody has a choice.
Yeah.
Just like you don't want your freedoms treaded upon by wearing a mask or whatever. You don't have the right to do that to anybody else. And that is that actually breathes new life into life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yes.
And
until we see people as people.
Yeah.
And we realize, and I do this for Christians especially, because I am a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Until we realize that the path that God has for people is the path that He has, and we cannot orchestrate that. How arrogant is it of us to determine what somebody's life path is? That is not our job. Our job is to love. And until we reconcile that that is our job, and our job is also to make it in a way that they can live and live freely in whatever they want to live, and our job is to show them how to get to Christianity or how to get to that, but it is not our job to make them. That's when we will really move forward as a country. Because we are holding our country back. And when we get there, and this is not a progressive, this is not a liberal, this is not a conservative message, but when we get to that place, that's when we are able to understand that it's not about what political party you're affiliated with. It is really about the people and making sure people are given the same rights that everyone else is given and receives the same treatment as everyone else. That's when we will get to the place where we can actually work as a community, as people, and as a nation in a way that we have never worked before.
Wow. And I hope that you and I both live to see that day come.
Yes.
Patrice, this has been such a worthwhile conversation that I think is needed, not just for me, because I learned a lot today. But I think conversations like this can help us to move in a different direction. So thank you so much for sharing your time, your person,
Thank you.
And your energy with us today.
Thank you.
It means a lot. And before we sign off everything, I want to end the show like I always do. With the pivot questionnaire, which some may know and others may not, is the questionnaire that James Lipton used to do at the end of his show inside the actor studio. I just think it's a great way to end the show on a lighter moment. and it's a great way to get to know folks, and know some interesting things about them, because this is interesting people. So to start off, what is your favorite word?
My favorite word is flabbergasted.
Why?
I love the way that it sounds in my mouth.
Okay.
And when you think of flabbergasted, it's like that's exactly the perfect word for flabbergasted.
I bet.
Because it's just like, what? Exactly, flabbergasted.
So eloquent. What is your least favorite word?
Antifa. I cannot stand Antifa because I don't know what it means.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand it's anti-fascist, but I'm like, what is that? Like, why are you saying that? So
right. Antifa. Okay. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Music.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things I tie everything to music, and
Mm-hmm.
it just can really motivate me in any way.
That's interesting, because when I read your bio that you sent me, you said in it that I'm every woman, and of course I was like, I'm every woman.
Yes, yes, yes.
And I heard it the rest of the way that I read it. I was like, this is fantastic. What turns you off?
Narcissism.
Yeah.
I can't.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. What is your favorite curse word? What's your favorite curse word?
It's fuck.
It's my favorite.
Did you hear me?
too. Yeah, I did.
Yes, fuck. There's just so many ways that you can say it.
Yeah.
Nice.
It does. And for me, it was always the forbidden fruit. So, yeah, it has that, like, yeah. So I totally get it.
Yeah.
Small disclaimer to all the church people on watching. Yes, we don't just throw it around casually. We don't throw it around casually. What? No. I do too, but I was trying to say things, but okay. All right.
No, I'm sorry.
What sound or noise do you love?
Babies' laughter.
Oh,
I love hearing babies laugh. It's so sweet.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Snoring. And I do it, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I hate it.
Have you heard yourself snore?
I have.
Okay.
And it's weird. It wakes me up, and I'm like, what is this? Oh, it's me.
So, one of my doctors actually told me about this app called Snore Lab.
Ew.
So you can turn it on. You turn it on like 20 minutes before you go to sleep or whatever, and it'll record you during the night.
Oh, no.
So you can hear.
I don't need to.
All right, moving on. So what profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Actress.
I could see that.
Yeah, I wanted to be. Before I wanted to be a lawyer, I wanted to be an actress. So
get out. What profession would you not like to do?
Cleaning.
I get it.
I'm not good.
I get it. And lastly, if you believe heaven exists, which you do, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
I would like him to say, you did it. Whatever it is that he has me to do, I did it.
That feels good going down. Like, like hot tea on a winter's day. Yeah. Patrice, this has been so great. I appreciate the person you are. I appreciate all the time that you gave today to make things clearer for me and our listeners. If people wanted to reach out to you, is there a way that they can get in touch with you, social media or what have you?
Sure, I am on Facebook, Patrice Lewis, PatriceLewis. You'll see my face and my glasses, so you'll know who I am. I'm also on Twitter and I am on Instagram, PPVOT.ESQ. That's for Esquire. So look me up there. And I am also available at lewis.patrice@gmail.com. If you want to send me anything, feel free to do so.
That's perfect. And as always, you can check out this interview as well as others at the Liberated Media page at www.liberated-media.com. We also have a Facebook page that I just got up this week. We are moving. And also, we've got a presence on YouTube, on our YouTube channel at the Liberated Media YouTube channel. So you can see this episode there as well. And this show is a podcast. We're available pretty much on everywhere podcasts are available. I have to cross over that Apple threshold. We're working through that and talking through that. Just give me time. But we're everywhere else on Spotify, Breaker, Radio Public, Google Podcasts, pretty much anywhere else other than Apple that podcasts are available. Thank you so much for joining us today. Be kind to one another, love one another, and let's just be informed citizens and get in the process and Wakanda forever. As she just did. Not the shoulders. Oh my God. Anyway, this is Tiffany. This is Tiffany Coleman signing off. Have a great day. And in all of your doing, make sure you liberate somebody else.